Welcome to Where I'm From, the podcast that proves no matter how far you go, you'll always keep a little piece of home with you. I'm Bill Meeks. This week, Iyaz Akhtar joins me to talk about where he's from, Queens, New York. Was Iyaz's upbringing more Kevin James or The Nanny? We're going to find out. You might know Iyaz from his previous gigs reporting on tech news for places like the Twit Network.
I'm going to give you a pro tip from me when it comes to setting up a blog. When you get a domain...
Or CNET.
CNET, Senior Associate Editor. Hey, good morning. By the way, Iyaz, nice to see you. Iyaz Akhtar, nice to see you.
These days, you can find him as a frequent panelist on Tom Merritt's daily tech news show.
CES 2023, 18-inch laptops, and Iyaz Akhtar helps us understand why Microsoft says it doesn't know when Call of Duty launched. This is the Daily Tech News for Tuesday, January 3rd.
Or hacking his house on his YouTube series, This Old Nerd.
Welcome to This Old Nerd. I am This Old Nerd, Iyaz Akhtar, and this show is all about having the most tech-forward home and life.
But today, I'm talking to Iyaz about where he's from, Queens, New York, and the surrounding area. I am pumped to finally be talking to somebody about the Big Apple, and we might just fit in a couple tech things too. You never know, we're both pretty techy. All right, let's go talk to Iyaz, huh? And I'd like to welcome to Where I'm From, Iyaz Akhtar. How are you doing today, Iyaz?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you today?
Excellent, excellent. Now, we were talking a little bit before the show, and we've known each other for like a million years. I believe today is the first time we've ever actually spoken.
Yeah, we've known each other for, I think, internet time about 3,600,000 days, and we've never spoken. It's been a lot of tweets, a lot of whatever social networks will pop up, maybe even like like Peach or Path or whatever these things are. I'm sure we've been friends on those things as well. So it's a pleasure to actually talk to you in real life, sort of this way.
I usually disappoint people, Iyaz, so that makes me really glad to hear that you're excited about this too. So far, anyway, I still have time. I do want to say, though, that I have sat in your chair, because when I went to Indonesia with previous Where I'm From guest, Brian Brushwood, we stopped at the Twit Brick House in Petaluma, California, and I sat in your chair and I sent you a picture saying, this is my spot now.
It was a nice chair. There's a story behind it. There is Justin Robert Young, if you guys know him. He left me a note one day. I was also not at the Brick House when this note was written. It said, I farted in your chair, and a little heart. It's a jury. And I still don't have that paper anymore. Go figure. Didn't keep that.
Doubt that's something you'd want a memento of necessarily.
Yeah, I didn't. I should have probably put it in Lucite and sold it on eBay, but I made a mistake. A horrible, horrible mistake.
The market for Justin's farts has gone way down. They're not nearly worth what they used to be. It's kind of like Bitcoin, slow decline.
Fluctuating flatulence.
I was wanting to know, because I grew up in an area that was much smaller than the New York City area. What was it like growing up in the big city?
So growing up in Queens, it was a little strange. I mean, the neighborhood I grew up in is not a lot of people like me in it. At least when I was growing up, it was a lot of Italian and Irish and Catholic, very Catholic. I went to Catholic school there because it was cheaper than private school. So all my friends' names were like Christopher and Brian and Jennifer. And then there was Iyaz. And that was like, oh boy, this is a name. And it's like, is it Iyaz? And it's like, no, it's Iyaz. It's like, is it Iyaz? That's Iyaz. And like, the thing is, if my kindergarten teacher, she pronounced my name as Iyaz, and I said, yeah, that's fine. And that was why I stuck with it. Like my parents called me a slightly different version of it. I'm like, well, I don't care. But that's what stuck. So that was at least parochial school in Queens for the first 8 years. And then I went to Briarwood for another 4, which is also in Queens.
So the correct pronunciation is not Iyaz.
It is now.
Oh,
it's Iyaz.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Iyaz. I've completely like my folks used to call me Ayaz, and that's another name though. It's an Ayaz. I'm like, if that's what you're calling me, why didn't you write it Ayaz? That also would have been easier for teachers and everything. They're like, I don't know exactly why. I even asked my mom recently, I'm like, why did you guys name me Ayaz, by the way? And they're like, my mom says, your dad just liked the name. I'm like, well, that's it. I don't have, it's not like there was like maybe like a fellow student he used to work with, or like maybe another doctor he used to work with or something. It's like, nope, he just liked the name. I still don't have a full origin as to why I'm called Iyaz other than that.
Considering that, your career has kind of veered into the tech space for the past number of years, did you ever consider back when the iPod was first coming out, like spelling it with like the lowercase I and then Yaz?
Yes, I used to do that at the CNET chat room. Back in the days, I used to be in the CNET chat room all the time. I would be working and plugging along, and then I would be in the chat room at the same time. And I would put in comments every now and then, and I hear Tom Merritt go like, Iyaz in the chat room says, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dang it, that doesn't work. So I tried exactly what you said. I did the lowercase I, cap Y, A, Z. And from then on in, they called me Iyaz. And I'm like, hey, that worked. That's great. And that's why even to this day on my LinkedIn, like it literally has a lowercase I and look for fonts that have, serifs on it. So that way it doesn't look like Liaz, which is a whole other thing.
Did anyone ever give you that nickname growing up? Man, you're a liar. You're a Liaz.
Not yet. I think my ethics are quite good on that. So I've not been called Liaz, although that's my couple's name with my wife now. So like Liz and Iyaz is Liaz. There actually is a story behind that. She got me a giant mug and it was inscripted. And so she wanted my name on it. The Thundercats logo was really cool. But the thing is, the guy thought the I was an L. And so we have this giant mug that says Liaz, and Liz is like, this is our couple's name. And I'm like, okay, great. So now Liaz is a thing and Iyaz is still a thing. And so we have both. And I have both mugs.
As a parent myself, I've been struggling because we live in Los Angeles now, and I've been struggling with how soon I should cut the apron strings with my kids, right? So I was wondering, when you were growing up in New York City area, what was that process like for you about, your parents sort of like slowly untying the apron strings?
Oh boy, I don't know if they ever stopped. I mean, I think they're still attached. So my folks are from Pakistan, and so I was first generation American. There's 4 kids. I'm the third one. There's an older boy, the oldest boy, the daughter, me, and the youngest. So I'm the kind of default middle kid because I'm the second boy and I'm the second youngest. So I'm like, well, I'm really unique. That's what I am. Growing up, basically, because my folks were outnumbered, my dad was working like crazy as a doctor. My mom was stay at home. So she would basically rule the roost with, at times there'd be a stick, literally a stick or threats. And so those really worked well. So we behaved quite well. As much as we could. And we also were partnered up at a certain point where my mom basically deputized the older 2 siblings and like, okay, you're responsible for the youngest and you're responsible for the other one, and let's go. So now anytime anything went wrong, I'd have to take it up with my sister or my older brother, depending on who was partnered with. And so
that's good. That's it. Delegation. I grew up in a really big family too. I think like 7 kids in the house that we grew up in.
Wow.
And that was basically once you hit about 11 or 12, you were responsible for everyone under you.
So they had deputies watching me and I had to like plead my case to them, and then it could be escalated essentially. I didn't realize what was going on as a child. I'm realizing it now. It's like, yeah, that's right. I had to ask somebody, and then I had to ask somebody else, and then maybe they get back to me about this. My folks, they were very strict and they were very, be a lawyer or doctor. It's because that's what you have to do. So I have a couple of law degrees, even though I didn't practice, because it's like, here, mom, I got him. We're good. And so I retired officially and I don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Unless I change my mind. So, the apron strings, it was, you got to be home at a certain time. I didn't get to hang out at parties when I was a kid. There was a lot of because there was 4 kids, that was enough. My mom did not want to deal with other kids at the house. We had 1 party or 2 parties I remember. So it was pretty, I wouldn't say isolated. It was insulated. I'll go with that because my family was 6 people. So that's a lot of, if you obviously you understand. And there's a lot of activity in the house. You don't really feel alone. And my dad was always talking about liability. That was his thing. It's like, listen, you don't want to bring these kids in the house because something breaks and I don't want to deal with that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm 8. I don't know about liability and insurance and stuff. But he's explaining it to me when I was 8. So I'm like, all right, fine. I guess we can't have kids over, but I can hang out with them in the meantime after school.
That's a lot of pressure to put on an 8-year-old. We don't want our insurance premiums to go up, sort of thing.
It was honest. It's real. That's really happened.
That's something I struggle with a lot with my kids because I don't feel like my parents necessarily prepared me very well for how the real world works. So I want to give them, a good foundation and all that stuff, especially financially. But at the same token, they're like, we're not going to listen to you anyway, Dad. There's always that pushback that, you've been on this planet for decades longer than I have, but you probably don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think the thing is you got to be strategic on when you let them fail. I've got now, he's 12 and a half now. So he's going to be 13 in June, which is terrifying to think about. We have a saying in this house, in our home, that it's a hit the bridge moment. And that refers to when my son, when he was about 4 or 5, and I said, hey man, you've gotten taller. Be careful when you're running around the playground because that drawbridge there is low and you're taller now. So you're going to hit that thing. Okay. He says, okay, Dad. I said, hey man, you heard what I said, right? He says, yes. And so a couple minutes later, I see him running around. I'm seeing he's going right after that bridge. He's going to go right into it. And I'm waiting and I'm like, okay, I have to let him do it. So he bonks his head on the bridge and he sits on his butt. He's just like kind of sitting there like this for a second, looks up, he's fine, and then starts running around again. But then on in, like anytime we run into an issue, I'm like, hey, listen, this is a hit the bridge moment. Okay. I can let you fail or you can listen to me. Your choice. And so it still has meaning to this day.
Maybe part of the reason kids push back so much is because they feel sort of powerless in the situation, or like they're being told what to do. If you kind of give them that choice, it kind of eases a little bit, and then you maybe try and lead them to the right choice.
Yeah, I had to ask my son when he was little. I was like, hey, what's it like just getting picked up randomly and moved? He's like, it's normal. And I go, well, it's not really for, adults. You don't really see me get picked up and moved to from one side to the next. He goes, I guess it's a little strange. You're sitting somewhere, one place, and then you're elsewhere. I'm like, okay. All right. I always wanted to know what that was like. So yeah, they're trying to figure out so much stuff. The pushback is almost natural. And the other thing is like, if they have any semblance of intelligence, that's when they push back, I think, the most. Because they can try to figure out if you're technically saying the thing you're asking them. Like, am I asking specifically about this one thing? Because I can't. Yeah. Or am I actually the spirit behind what I said? These arguments, those are fun. Those are super fun.
It's always tough for me personally because I grew up punk rock, right? So I have like this, screw authority sort of attitude. And that's something that I don't necessarily want to discourage in my kids because it served me well. By the same token, I'm the authority in this situation. So I'm kind of like, not completely serving my own interest here.
Yeah, that's a tough one, trying to make sure your kid or kids have their own critical thinking while trying to be the authority figure. Like I've even told my son, like, hey, listen, you're going to have to fight against everybody at some point, including me. So if you think I'm wrong, like, okay, well, you better be thinking about it and be reasonable about it at least. So I've even encouraged him to do that, which is to my own detriment, but it's, I think it's for the greater good. That's how I keep it. It's the greater good because in the current situations, it's like, oh man, why didn't I just tell him to listen to me? If I just did that, it's like, no, question me. So
you try and be someone who guides your children, but at the same token, you have to make sure that they don't kill themselves or whatever,
That is an actual literal concern. That's very annoying that's an actual thing you have to worry about, but it's true.
My daughter, Leah, she's in high school now, and she started walking home from school, which is about a mile and a half. And I try and, keep the apron strings untied and let her, do what she needs to do. But by the same token, when it gets about 10 after when she's supposed to be home, I'm like, oh, geez, here we go. Like, it's always a constant source of panic. But that's my problem, I guess.
My son, he walks himself to school at this point. We're like 7 or 8 blocks in Manhattan. So it's not, and it's pretty well lit and it's nice around this area. So it's pretty safe. But I still get nervous if he's like running late. About when he's getting back, it's like, okay, because of course, you got the parent brains. You're thinking like, what if he got ran over? What if something happened? What if there's construction? What if what if he's messing with his phone and something happens? Like, all right, just relax, just text him, he'll right back. So the texting stuff, I think that helps because the communication thing is real. So you can just be like, hey, what happens? Like, oh, I'm hanging out with a friend right now. It's like, all right, fine.
Yeah, and I think to expand on your what if something happened, like the thing that constantly goes through my mind is what if something happened and I could do something if I knew about it or whatever. And then you just sit there and you worry about it until you find out everything's okay.
Yeah, and then you let it go for a second and it starts all over again the next day. It's parenting.
What age did they start letting you do like stuff like public transportation, like taking the subway or whatever by yourself? Your parents?
I think, I don't know if they even ever let me do that. That's the weird thing. So like for me, because my siblings were certain ages, like there'd be a point where they were able to drive. So, and we always lived within walking distance of our grade school. So we always walked to school there. And then for high school, my older brother had a license. So he would drop us, because he went to the same school. Then my dad would drop us. So they almost never made us use the public transportation. But I think we were allowed somewhere around mid high school where it was okay to like take the bus. That was a big thing when I took the bus. Like the first time, they're like, "Oh, you took the bus." I'm like 15. I'm a big guy, and there's really no real reason to worry about this. But yeah, I think it was about 15 when they kind of like just said, "All right, that's fine." Because the other thing is, by the time I turned 16, I'm already driving, so I wouldn't be taking public transportation as much.
Did you ever have any sort of close calls or anything in those early days of taking public transportation, or like situations where you're like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't have done this?
No, I mean, it was pretty safe, but it was strange. I didn't know exactly how to stop the bus. That's the first thing. I wasn't like taught like, pull the string or hit the button. I'm just like, how do people get off this bus? I don't even understand that part. I don't understand where the stops are. Do they stop at every stop? I didn't know any of that stuff. So, versus nowadays, they actually have like beautiful screens. I take public transportation all the time now, but they have screens and they tell you, okay, this is the next stop, and they have an automated voice versus you're going, blah, 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 blah. You have no idea what's going on. Versus, the next stop is your 84th, and you're like, great, that's fantastic. But I don't think I ran into anything too untoward. But it was mostly just being naive and just not knowing a lot of this stuff, because it just wasn't something that my folks were big into. And so they weren't like, but versus my son, who's taking subways and buses all the time. So he knows he's getting better at like, hey, if you see a train car, right? We're like on the subway and you see a car and it's like empty and the rest of them are packed. There's probably a reason why it's empty. It's either it's a person, it's a smell, or it's an item, or it's got no heat, or it's got no AC. There's something wrong with that one. Just think twice about it. So he's much more educated than I was.
Yeah. And, just the improvements in public transportation over the past 15 years have been phenomenal. Like I lived out here in Los Angeles back in the mid 2000s, and it was like I had to pull up like a MapQuest listing and print it out, and then, make sure that I was here at a certain time, or I'd have to wait 45 minutes and I'd get lost trying to take public transit. Now, like you said, it's super easy. They have screens on the buses and the trains, and, you can just pull up the app and it'll plan your route for you, give you an ETA. It's well, I haven't let my kids do public transit yet. I'd be much more comfortable letting them do it now than I would have even, 10 years ago.
Yeah. And, having a phone is a giant change. And just literally putting in a route and then finding out, this one train is actually delayed. Take a 2 or 3. You actually get that on your phone before you even hear it in the station, which is very, very nice. There's a lot more convenience right now.
Where I'm From is brought to you by Stream Studio. That's STREANN Studio, the web app that puts you in charge of the live show. Stream Studio allows you to take your streaming game to the next level by allowing you to stream to multiple platforms at once. If you want to go to Twitch, if you want to go to YouTube, you can stream to all of those platforms at once, get feedback from your audience, and most importantly, it puts you in control of the show. Now, Stream Studio has several packages that work for just about any type of broadcaster. From the free plan, where you can stream with a watermark, all the way up to the gold plan, where you can have up to 8 guests. You can stream to as many social platforms as you want. You can get a web link to share your show with external audiences, and you can even get an iframe so you can embed your live stream show directly into your website. Hey, I love Stream Studio so much, I'm using it to produce this show. I want to thank Stream Studio for supporting Where I'm From, and you can give this fantastic software a spin and support Where I'm From at the same time. Just head over to our website at billmeeks.com/whereimfrom and click on the Stream Studio banner so they know we sent you their way. And we want to thank Stream Studio for sponsoring Where I'm From. Go check it out. Great service. Back in your old neighborhood, where was your favorite place to eat? And is it still around?
Okay, that would actually be in Howard Beach. It was a place called Waterview Diner. The last time I was out in Howard Beach was several years ago, and it was still there. And it was a diner. We thought it was fancy, but my anytime something good would happen at school, or like something good happened for my dad or mom, we'd go out to Waterview Diner and have London broil steaks. My mom would always get the fisherman's platter. And I was like, why did she get the fish and we all get the steak? I don't understand this. And and the water view itself is like terrible. Like only like 2 or 3 of the booths can see the water. Like the rest of it's just like the parking lot. they had this amazing bread. This is my memory of it. So I haven't had this food in probably 20 years. I should go back just to see if, I don't think it's going to taste as good as I remember. There's no possible way it does. But the bread was fantastic and like the food was really good. We'd go there and we'd just 6 of us. So then we'd always have the big booth. My dad would talk to the guy behind the counter. They're like, oh, Akhtar, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, why does he call you Akhtar? Do you know your first name? He goes, it's just easier this way. I said, okay. So we'd go there, and so that was kind of fun. I don't know. I mean, it's the one that I have the best memories of because it was fancy then. But now I'm like, it's a diner, dude. Like, it's not like it's super bright and like they have like 1,000 desserts and like the menu was pages and pages, which I understand. If you got 4 kids, you're like, okay, one of you is going to figure out like somebody's going to be different. So like, there's another like 30 options to eat. So don't argue with me about what you're going to eat. But that was a place and still around at least a couple of years ago. So if you're in Howard Beach, check out the Waterview Diner. I'm not being paid to say this. And if it's any good, let me know.
No, but diner food is always fun. It's like, it feels like they have like 12 ingredients and every diner has like a 16-page menu. Mm-hmm. What was your favorite dish to get there?
I would get the London broil steak because we didn't really eat a lot of steaks or anything. And my mom, when she would cook beef, she would boil it. And I was like, why would you do that? But she did. And it was awful. So to get a good piece of steak, you'd have to go to the Waterview Diners. I would order that a lot. The steak fries were fantastic. I remember I think I had French dressing for the first time there. I remember that being like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is so like rich and like, but my favorite thing was the London broil steak and steak fries with it. And every now and then my mom would make me try some of the jumbo shrimp from her fisherman's platter because she's like, do you like this now? Because I would always be told to try something over and over again until maybe it'll click, maybe it won't, which I like shrimp now, but I didn't then. So the steak definitely was my favorite.
Just out of curiosity, since this is the first place that popped into your mind, were there any like significant moments in your life that happened at that diner?
Oh, no. Other than me, with my experiments. Now if my son did this, I'd be like, stop it, just stop it. But when I was younger, I'd say around like 10 to 12, somewhere around there, I would basically take anything that was left in like random containers and just like put it all in like a somewhat empty like milkshake glass. And I just wanted to see the colors mix and stuff. I wanted to see what it would turn into. Yeah. And so I would get in trouble at first about this. And they were like, what are you doing? You're making a mess and like, they got to clean this up and whatever. And I'm like, it's all in the glass. Okay. So I'm not making a mess. They're going to clean that anyway. I'm like, this is an experiment. So it became, the phrase would be like, oh, Iyaz is doing his experiments right now. Cause I'm like, that was allowed because it was an experiment. If you call it science, I mean, I should have been right. Like that Adam Savage line, like if I just wrote down the results, it would be science, but I didn't do that. But that would be my dumb thing I would do there a lot. Because I was a jerk kid. Well, if it makes you feel any better, my first job was as a busser at Bob Evans, and it wouldn't have made that much of a difference to me good to know. If there was a bunch of junk in the glass, because it was just like big trash can, and then you just dump everything, throw it in the dish tank. A cup full of junk wouldn't have been any worse than a plate full of junk. A cup full of junk sounds like an excellent album title, by the way, in case you're looking for one. Cup full of junk. My next album that comes out, Iyaz's Diner Experience. Cup Full of Junk will be the first one. It just rolls off the tongue. Iyaz, I always like to ask people, just because I had a lot of teachers who had a profound effect in my life. Were there any teachers you had growing up where you're from that had a profound effect in your life? Oh, yeah. I definitely have. I have some, almost every single teacher I had in grade school was like a character out of some kind of like television show. The more I think about it, obviously it could be amplified by my child memory, but like Miss Conti was my kindergarten teacher, and she was fantastic and sweet and nice as like any like heroine character in any rom-com you've ever seen. So she was amazing. Then I get to first grade and it's actual Catholic school. Ooh. So now Miss Rohan, she did not like children. Why is she teaching first graders? I don't know, but she was a little bit meaner compared to the super nice one. Then my second grade teacher, she was all right. she got married. I remember she got married in the middle of the year. We're like, we had to call her something different. We're like, oh, that was weird. So I learned that people change their names. I did not know that. Was that significant in my life? It was, because I literally didn't know this was a thing. Third grade, Mrs. Mangieri drove the biggest white Caprice Classic you've ever seen. She looked super mean and turned out to be very nice. Sister Claire, my fourth grade teacher, so it was a Catholic school. Sister Claire already had my older brother and older sister as her students. I would get so much crap from Sister Claire. Why aren't you like your older brother? Why aren't you like, because he was a suck up, right? And he would like clean stuff and like do stuff. I'd get reamed out for like, why aren't you helping me? It's like, you didn't ask me. I don't know what you're talking about. Like I literally had no idea what was going on. Profound effect by Sister Claire. I think this could have, I think it's actually child endangerment now. But like anytime a bee or an insect, a flying insect would get into the classroom, she'd say, students, heads down. So we all put our heads down. And then you would hear this noise for the next like 30 seconds. She's spraying Raid everywhere. Okay. And you feel it come on you. And you're like, oh, this is gross. This is dangerous, right? You think, well, you don't know. So that was, Sister Claire definitely had a mark. She made a mark on me because I still remember this to this day. That was fourth grade. I had a religion teacher in high school, because I went to high school in Queens as well. And he broke my mind because normally, it's Catholic school. So it's dogmatic. And you're supposed to, I got an opinion question wrong on a religion question, by the way. I remember that in 8th grade. But in high school, this guy was saying, hey, listen, why don't we just challenge this? Who is the beloved disciple? Could it be Mary Magdalene? He's actually asking a lot of questions versus teaching just the dogmatic version of it. So that was very interesting to me to see after, I think, about 10, 11 years of Catholic school, of it just being, this is the way, this is the way, this is the way. And I'm not Catholic, by the way, as my name would probably indicate. This teacher, Mr. Gambino, he would just tell us, hey, look, so here's the thing. What if Jesus is so great, I hope I'm not offending anybody with this. It's like, and he's on the cross, why doesn't he like just pop off the cross, yell, I'll be back in 3 days, and like do a couple spins and go back on? Because he could do that. And I'm like, that's kind of a ridiculous idea. But like, you think about it, you're like, this is an interesting way to challenge your dogmatic thinking, which that became something that I really enjoyed because none of the other teachers would ever bother to have us question these things. Yeah. That was really eye-opening because, to me, it was basically, it's not my religion. It's basically like a history class of a fiction book. It's like, great. We're doing Lord of the Rings today. Great. But I don't care. But to make you think about it, I was like, okay, this is great. I liked that approach just because it was different. I got another teacher I just remembered right now, Brother James Marr. He was my math teacher. Oh man, did he do a number on me? Every day, and this is freshman year of high school. Every day, like we'd have homework. We'd have to go to the board though, and we'd be assigned one of the homework questions to write on the board. So we have our answers. We got to put them up on the board. We got to show it. And if they were right, they'd be explained to the class. And if you weren't, you have to explain that to the class. Yeah, which was always very frightening. And I almost failed the first quarter of the first year because I was not checking my work. I was being really, really lazy. And he had me go to the board a lot. And I had so much unfinished work and we had to talk about stuff back and forth. But he showed me that you can do the work up to a point where you don't understand it. And that's fine. We can figure out a way to solve everything together. We're not just testing you on your ability to finish a question. We're testing your ability to see if you can do the actual steps, step by step. Where did you get stuck? Where did you miss something? Because math's a series of steps anyway. So you don't have to worry so much about like, oh, I'm never going to get it. It just broke down things a lot easier. And then I did much better in the class because I did not want to get embarrassed in that class anymore. But yeah, Brother James Marr was pretty awesome.
Well, those problem-solving abilities, I think, probably has a lot of parallel between where you eventually went to, which is, technology. I'm assuming you got into tech while you were living there, but what kind of gear did you use and what really made you dig in?
That would be my dad's fault entirely. He was a gadget nut. He would go into these stores on a place called Liberty Avenue, and it would always be like these mom and pop shops. This is before the days of all these Best Buys and big box stores. So like you basically would be going This is obviously pre-internet, so you can't really like you can't compare prices.
Yeah.
So we'd go into these electronic shops, and he would buy like something called the Watchman, which was a portable television, which was like the Walkman from Sony. And these things were like amazing. So he'd be like buying these like weird little gadgets, and then he'd kind of get bored of them. So I'd start messing with them. Like he had a Radio Shack Rolodex thing that was an actual like it was a PDA before PDAs were a thing. So he had a couple of those things, and I'd spend a lot of time in Radio Shack with him, just looking at things and learning about stuff. The weird thing is my brother was always into computers. So my folks got him a computer. He had an Apple IIe, which was something I tried to play with. I'm like, I didn't understand it at the time because I was so young. I'm like, it's got a green screen. That's great. Wonderful.
Yeah.
But
I think I picked up one of those at a thrift store in like 1997 or something. And I couldn't find any software for it. The internet wasn't what it was now or anything. So I think I eventually ended up tossing it. I'm like, oh man, if I had just saved that thing.
Oh yeah. There's definitely a lot of tech I wish I had not lost over the course of years. But we had a Tandy computer because we went to Radio Shack, and Tandy was the house brand. It was called the Tandy Sensation. This is actually how it really sparks everything in my tech world, because I really love gadgets and stuff, and I love playing with this stuff. But this is where I actually got really into computers of all things. So Tandy Sensation had a CD-ROM it had a speaker in it. It's like, oh wow, this is amazing. And I'm playing with it, and I crashed a program. Now, the Tandy Sensation had a front end that covered up Windows. And I didn't know this at the time because I didn't know Windows. I didn't know any of this stuff. So like it had like a bunch, it's kind of like several different sections. You remember like what the old AOL looks like? And it's like, here, like here's multimedia, and here's like print shop, and here's this. So like had these own like
community or whatever. Yeah.
It had its own like little brick interface. And I'm like, okay, that's great. And it would open things up in full screen. But one day I crashed that thing. And I'm like, oh, what am I seeing? What is this like bluish green screen? What is this? It was Program Manager, right? So I'm like, I can't find the program. I can't bring it back. I'm like, oh my God, I broke the thing. And that's how I learned Windows 3.1. I started just messing around with this thing, started messing with this more and more. I actually went to the Radio Shack because I wanted to install a program, and I didn't know how to do it because it was a DOS-based program. And this is how long ago this is. When I went to Radio Shack, the lady behind the counter said, you got a piece of paper? We said, yeah. So my dad brought out a notebook, and she wrote out all the DOS commands that we needed to do to install a game. And I was like, okay, this is amazing. The amount of information that people used to know that used to work at Radio Shack. Obviously, Radio Shack doesn't exist. But imagine a big box electronics store where the people there can actually give you command prompts and how to do this thing.
And it's not just some teenager who doesn't know what he's talking about and got the job because he wanted to get cheap video games.
No, definitely not. This lady knew computers inside and out. I learned DOS. I got DOS for Dummies. I bought that book. I bought Windows for Dummies because I didn't know anything. So I learned so much, and I got really into it. And then Windows 95 popped up. Oh my gosh, I would read PC Mag, PC World. I'd buy the special editions. Oh, Chicago's coming. I'm so excited about this. To the point where I asked my dad, I'm like, hey, can we go at midnight to Staples to get Windows 95? And he's like, ooh. Yeah. I'm like, okay. So we go to Staples in Queens to get Windows 95, the upgrade discs, 13 discs. Mm-hmm. So I stayed up till about 1:30 in the morning installing this because I just really, and once it actually loaded and there it was, the start button was on the bottom left, and I was like, cool. And then I went to sleep because like it was too damn late. Like I wasn't supposed to be up. So that was that's I got a lot of gear in Queens through computers and Staples and Radio Shack.
Yeah, I remember having to swap floppies for big installs like that. Like Windows was, I think even DOS came on 3 or 4 floppies at the time, which was always just a pain because you had to babysit it, right? You couldn't, even if it was going to take an hour, you couldn't just start it and walk away. You had to be there to flip flop. And if you pop one out wrong, then it's corrupted. You have to order a new one or get one from a friend or something.
When the little magnetic slider thing, I don't know the name of it, when that cover would catch, you know, that when it would start catching on the inside of the computer, or the disk drive.
Yeah.
I was freaking out because that happened on my install. And I'm like, what? Oh, no. Okay. So like I had to kind of fix it. I'm trying to make sure the thing actually works because I wanted to upgrade another machine too with the same discs, which I know I'm not supposed to do, but whatever. It's Windows 95. Sue me. But that was so weird that was a thing. And then eventually I got Windows 95 on a CD-ROM. I'm so excited because it came with a computer. I'm like, it's one thing. It's only one thing. I don't need to have this stack. I remember having those floppy disk containers. You know, the ones that they'd open up. They're
Yeah.
smoked plastic on the top with like a beige bottom or whatever, blue.
Those 3.5 floppy disks, though, they were so durable. Like I remember in high school, I didn't have a special case for my floppy disk. I would just toss it in my backpack. So inevitably that metal clip would fall off and the disk would still work for at least a few weeks until I could get it replaced.
It must be some magic in the air you were in, because in New York, that thing would just be like, I'm dead. And you're like, what? I just looked at you funny. Come on, stop it.
Well, there are magnets everywhere. I went to high school in West Virginia where they didn't invent magnets until like 1999. So
that would do it. That's why your discs were safe.
You know, we're talking tech already. Was it a pretty supportive environment for young nerds such as yourself? Was there community? Was there resources for you?
When I was in grade school and into tech and gadgets and stuff, that was mostly video games. So that community was just, kids playing video games. So we talk about that and trade games and mess with EGM and Electronic Gaming Monthly, by the way, for those of you who don't read old magazines. I don't know if that's even still a thing. Game Pro, I think, was the other one. That was the stapled bound one versus the square back one. So that the community was based in that, essentially. And my siblings were into the games as well. So that was grade school. By high school, though, that's when I started talking to my friends in school about like the internet and dial-up modems, and we were talking about bulletin boards. Oh, that's right, I forgot totally about Prodigy way back when I was a kid. I was on Prodigy when I learned about what email was, and it was working with a guy because I wanted to be a comic book artist, and he was helping me do that. So like, I'm talking to this guy in Arizona. I'm like, how am I talking to a guy in Arizona? It was for free too. It was very strange.
Back in the day, Prodigy and Usenet news groups, comic book professionals were all over that thing. Like I used to, when I was on CompuServe, I used to go to like a Q&A that John Byrne, the comic book writer, would hold like every month about his cool. Superman books that were coming out at the time or whatever.
Oh yeah, Man of Steel. So like the thing, that's right. I forgot about like CompuServe, right? I think my first thing was Prodigy. That was like a DOS-based one. That was pretty cool. CompuServe was like the weird third one because AOL was like the big one. I remember using AOL a lot. And then I remember when I realized once you connected to AOL, you didn't have to stay in AOL. You could just open up a browser. I was like, oh my gosh, what the? I don't need to be in this anymore. Screw this. But yeah, in high school, there would be a lot of chats in the actual school about what people were working on, what you could share though. The thing is that things you could share were literally on floppy drives or floppy disks. Mm-hmm. So 1.44 megabytes is not a lot of data. So we would be like, here's a text file of the information you need. It's like, yeah, great. That's wonderful. But that school I was in, Malloy, Archbishop Malloy High School, was nerdy, super nerdy, very competitive, still is super competitive. But that place it had a computer lab. That was something neat. So we got to do that. So we learned some stuff there. So that community was through the actual school. So other than the original, when I started this with Prodigy and like online anonymous people, it was less anonymous in high school.
Yeah, and I just want to circle back real quick and clarify. I believe CompuServe, it didn't originally have a GUI. It was like a terminal thing. Like you connected via terminal, and then it was all text-based when it started.
Okay. I don't remember the text-based version of CompuServe, because that was much later. I didn't realize there were so many different services at the time. Like, obviously, it's different now. Very, very different now. Yeah,
because I remember I was really... Because I think by the time we signed up for it, they had the GUI, but our computer couldn't run it. So once we got a new computer, I was like, oh my God, I can run CompuServe for DOS. And, it's a whole new world, but it really wasn't all that much better.
Yeah, it was so annoying. I mean, the modem days and people picking up phones, extensions, and they're hearing the noise. It's like, what's going on with this? And you're like, oh, you just killed this thing. I was downloading this for 20 days and it's gone now. You have to basically specify around the house. I remember, this sucked. I remember because you lived in a house with lots of people. So I'd imagine you dealt with this too, where you're like, nobody pick up the phone. Nobody touch the phone, please, right now. Versus now, so much better.
You'd be spending like 30 hours to download or 30 minutes to download a JPEG. And just before it got done, sister would pick up the phone and you'd have to start all over again.
So there goes Teri Hatcher.
Oh, the Teri Hatcher.
That
was a classic. Funny you mentioned Teri Hatcher, though, because one of the first big online communities I ever got into was a listserv, a mailing listserv for Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. And so Teri Hatcher was a big part of my early internet experience, we'll say.
Same here. Big part of my internet experience. You learn some things. You learn some things about yourself with The New Adventures of Superman, which I don't know if it's streamed. It must be on some streaming service. Maybe it's on Max or Discovery, whatever they're calling their new thing.
You know, in those early days of going around online and everything, we were taught, don't tell anyone your real name, don't have a friendly interaction at all and stuff. Did you follow those rules, or did you have some early online friendships or relationships?
Generally, I kept myself anonymous as possible. I had a handle, but when I was first starting off and I was on Prodigy looking to like, how can I do comic books? That was me being me, which was fine. But like otherwise, I was like, when I got older, I'm like, wait a second. I don't want people guessing stuff. I don't want them to know who I am.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally I was smartened up essentially over time. I don't know if it was from all of the panicked, news coverage of like, oh, kids are on the internet and there's also villains on the internet. You're like, well, I mean, if your kid's dumb enough to like visit with somebody like that, this is so weird nowadays. Like you meet strangers from the internet, that's dangerous. Now, like that's how people meet. So
yeah, you're a stranger from the internet in a way.
Yeah, well, it's the thing is the weirdos that were on the internet, because I remember when I was in high school and I had an email address, we would talk about this. It was like some of the kids in the school were like, that's silly. Why would you have that? When I got to college, I'm old. So 1997 is when I go to college, and everyone needed to have an email address. And some of the kids, they were like, what is this nerd crap? We need email for school? What is this? You don't need computers for school. This is ridiculous. And so like it became normalized. At this point, like if you don't have an email address, you're really weird. Back then, when you had an email address, you were really weird because you're trying to explain what an email is. You're like, oh yeah, so you can just send me a message. It's like, yes, it's free. It works. It's real. It doesn't matter what time of day, it'll show up. It's great.
Yeah, it's like our version of someone from the 1800s trying to explain how like the telegraph worked. Yeah, you can just walk into this office and give them a message and it'll show up across the country in 30 minutes or whatever it took to travel across
30 minutes? That's impossible. It cannot be.
Magic, witchcraft. You did mention when you sent me some information for me to prepare for today that you grew up near JFK Airport.
I did.
What are the minor inconveniences you experienced growing up next to an airport?
Oh my gosh. So apart from the fact that my home was under a flight path, which meant every now and then was this big whoosh from an airline or aircraft above, was very annoying. After a while, you kind of tune that out. It's not, eventually it's weird. You get used to it. But I found it highly annoying because back when HD TV came out, when you can actually get HD over antenna, I hooked up our old antenna in the house. I'm like, hey dad, like we can get HD TV. He goes, how? I'm like, well, we have an antenna. We can do this, right? He goes, okay. So we hook it up. But the thing is, we were watching 24 on Fox. I liked that show. But every time a plane would fly overhead, the picture would break up. You get the pixelation and it would freeze. And I was like, no, wait a minute. You're telling me that just an airline or aircraft going above the house could wreck the signal for a transmission? At the time, I didn't know how much data was being pushed through. But it's but that was very inconvenient because I liked being able to watch 24 in HD because that was like, it was so new back then.
Yeah.
One of the other places I lived near, the same house, by the way, I used to live by Aqueduct Racetrack. And one of the cool things about that was you could hear the national anthem before they would start the races. So when we would play basketball in the backyard, we would hear it. So we would stop and pretend like it was like, okay, we got a big place here. All right, we're ready to play ball. And then eventually they'd stop and start playing basketball. So that was kind of neat side effect of living next to the racetrack.
I'm guessing it was probably just planes flying like all day and night. But when 24 was airing, that's prime time. And that's also kind of prime time for planes to be landing. So that must have been very frustrating.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the thing is, like, when growing up in Queens, one of the things you learn real easily is you can like tune out noises. I can sleep through anything. I still can sleep through pretty much anything. Like right now, there can be sirens and stuff. If it's like 2 a.m, I'm dead to the world. So the airplanes, while it was annoying when it came to television, it was nice when we had to travel because like it's only a mile away in New York. It takes forever, by the way. Like I'm only like 5 miles away from the airport now, but it'll take 40 minutes to get into Queens because it's a nightmare by car. So it was kind of annoying, but like I said, you tune it out for the most part, except when you're trying to watch TV and it would screw up the TV.
Since we're already kind of talking about airplanes and stuff, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about 9/11, were you in New York during 9/11? What was that experience like for you?
I was not. I was working in Boston at the time. I just finished law school. No, I finished college and I was working as a legal assistant. So I remember hearing like in the news, people were talking about, oh, well, an airplane hit a building. And I'm like, well, that maybe this town doesn't understand how this happens sometimes. Because I was thinking it was a small plane. I thought, okay, this is just an accident. But then another thing happened. So I remember the office manager came out and he's like, okay, everybody go home. And so we all went home. I remember I bought like a giant thing of beer because I'm like, I don't know what the hell's happening. I bought a giant thing of beer and I sat and watched everything was going on. My brother was going to NYU at the time, which is much further away from the towers, but like, you don't know what's going on at this point. So trying to reach him, I tried to call him a bunch and it was a nightmare because the telephone lines were jammed. You couldn't get to anybody and he was on a cell phone. So that was more jammed. Everything was kind of messed up. So on that day, I basically just watched it, made sure my brother was all right. He was fine. My folks were in Queens, so they were okay. It was just like this, it was surreal because I was watching this on my television, just going like this. I mean, it looks like a movie and it's like, because I've never seen anything like that before. And it was just so bonkers. That's kind of an inappropriate word for it. I don't, bonkers isn't the right word, but that's the one that came to my mind. It's like, this is an unimaginable event. But I was in Boston at the time, and so I basically heard about it, and then I saw this. I think we heard about the second tower, then we heard about the Pentagon. That's when they sent us home. So like, it was just watching the news all day, and then I think my brother's school was closed. NYU was closed for a while, so he was. Yeah, it was a mess.
Yeah, I remember that morning I was in my dorm room in college working on an assignment or something like that. And there were people like shouting out in the hallway that something had happened at the World Trade Center. I flashed back to like, what was that, 93, 92, 93, somewhere in there where there was
in the basement
a bombing.
Yeah. There was a car bombing or not, it was a van or whatever. But yeah, somebody had a giant fertilizer explosive thing that they thought was going to damage the building and it didn't, not by any significant way. And the weird thing is, the after effects. So here's I'm not making light of the situation. So bear with me, people watching this at home or on your phone, wherever you are. But one of the things I wanted to do pre 9/11 is like, oh, you know what I want to do? I always want to get a pilot's license. And then I saw the names of these people. I'm like, well, I can't do that now. Great. Thanks a lot for that. And then I was watching the news and I'm like, okay, I got to look at everybody's names because if any of them sound anything like mine, it's going to be screwy. Like this is going to be a real problem. So I was watching, I'm like, there's an Akbar. All right. A couple Akbars. All right. No Akhtars, no Iyazes. All right. That's good. Because it was rough being a brown guy around that time. I would say for at least another 5 or 6 years was always, it was super weird. Anytime I would travel, people who think they're being subtle, but you could see that they were panicked around me and their panic would drop when they would hear me speak because I sound like this. And they're like, you would just see like the tense person and I'd be like, so, I talked to like to one of the TSA agents and be like, how's it going today? And you see their shoulders just drop. Like, oh, okay. Because he's one of us. It's like, yeah, I'm from Queens. I don't have time to be plotting stuff. I was, at the time, I was worried more about law school at the time because I was between college and law school. I don't have time to, like a person, I was like, I don't have time to plan something like that when I'm trying to like get to school and like make sure my assignments are done. I know that doesn't sound like a lot of big problems, but to me it was. So like, it was very, very difficult to have this name and this skin tone. Yeah. New York is pretty welcoming and Boston, not really. Boston is not exactly known to be the most welcoming of all races. And if you don't know anything about that, look it up. Just look up any interview with the Celtics, quite honestly. Watch anything with KG. He'll talk about it. But yeah, it was rough for a while. I still haven't thought about getting a pilot's license since because I'm like, my name's going to get me flagged. But on the other side, I do have my TSA pre-check, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. I do talk a lot, so people hear me and they relax a lot. And they just get annoyed because I'm annoying. That's much better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a much better outcome than, targeting you for, something you can't change, right?
Yeah.
I went to college in West Virginia.
Oh, boy.
I remember leaving the dorm and going up to class. I was a smoker back then. So there was a guy out front. I bummed a cigarette off him when we were talking about it. And I had never really heard someone kind of like unload all this racial, like specifically for Middle Eastern people. And I was just like, oh my God, like this is a whole new era of these people who are cruel thinking that they can be openly cruel.
Yeah.
Because it's justified.
I mean, when I was growing up in Queens, when I was really young, my folks are from Pakistan. So Pakistan wasn't really like an unknown country in Queens. All right. Because like there's India, which is massive with like 1 billion people, right? And then there's Pakistan, this little break off thing that people don't really know about because it's like less than 100 years old. It's a small country. So anytime I'd get racial stuff when I was a kid, they'd be like, you Indian, whatever. It's like, I'm not Indian. All right. So that's a whole other thing, guys. And so like, if you're going to be, I mean, I guess on the plus side, people are more educated so they can be better racist. So good on that. But yeah, that's always the repercussions of 9/11 and being brown. That was, I've only gotten a couple of weird internet comments about my race. So like at first I get a lot of crap about like, you talk too fast or your lighting's bad. I'm like, that's fine. I can fix that. But like certain things I was like, okay, all right, this is racist. I can't really argue that. It's like, well, those were not very usual. So that on the plus side.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That event definitely sort of like opened up a door for people who were kind of already like saying that sort of things behind closed doors to be more out in the open with it, which is just a shame and something that I don't think we've really recovered from yet in a lot of ways. Like you still hear a lot about, people, really digging in on someone's nationality as a reason not to trust or like them.
Yeah, it's kind of a silly thing to be like, yeah, you happen to have ancestors from a place where something happened. It's like, yeah, where are you from? What's going on? By the way, if anybody's watching this and you're wondering, hey, am I a bit racist? If you've asked this question, where are you really from? You might be a little racist. Don't ask anybody that question. I'm going to say that to, if you're watching this and you're like, how do I be a better human being? And I'm not a good human being. Just don't ask anybody where you're really from, because it's so weird. Because I've gotten that question like, where are you from? I'm like, Queens. They're like, oh, no, where are you really from? I was born in Brooklyn. Okay. But we moved when I was 3. You good now? They're like, come on. I'm like, yeah, you come on, move. Let's move on with this. Because it doesn't enhance the conversation. Or you get a very strange, oh, I've heard of somebody from there. And it's like this weird story. And you're like, yeah, that's not accurate. And I have no idea what you're talking about. And okay, just I'm not going to bond with you over that. Yeah. Yeah. And as someone who is from German heritage, like if someone came at me, like asking me questions about Germany, I'd be like, I don't know, see World War II, I guess. Yes.
I like bratwurst.
Consult your history books and Oktoberfest and we're good.
All right, Iyaz. Well, we're coming up to our first game here. This game's called
Hometown Hot Takes.
Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you 2 things that are somewhat based around your hometown, this or that questions, and you're going to have to tell me, pick one, and give me a justification as to why. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So first up, The Nanny versus King of Queens.
King of Queens, because I found Fran Drescher's voice so annoying. And King of Queens, I've watched the entire run of it. It was pretty good. I tried to rewatch it recently, and I'm like, it's not as good as I thought. And their version of Queens, they were somewhere closer to Briarwood, where my high school was. So Queens has got a lot of different parts. I grew up in the suburbs of Queens, which is very different than when you're seeing a bunch of apartment buildings. Or, okay, the one thing I'm going to complain about, King of Queens, the other thing I'm complaining about is that they had this California layout to like where their garage was. Nobody's garage is behind their house and like this alleyway. This is all like LA stuff. This is not how Queens is built. Like New York City doesn't have alleyways. Like all this crap you see on TV, BS. So, but King of Queens over Fran Drescher's The Nanny, which is an excellent show, I hear.
All right, so street hot dog versus cheap pizza.
Are we talking about like when I was a kid or like right now?
Let's go with right now.
Oh, then it's going to be a street hot dog because I don't really do cheese now. That makes it much easier.
Yeah, and those bucket slice places really don't do like the vegan cheese options or anything.
Yeah, I'm not messing with that right now. I'm too old. Back then, I'd probably go with if I was a kid, probably a pizza.
All right, Corona Park versus Central Park.
That's a tough one. That is really tough. Like I have childhood memories from Corona Park, and that was really neat and everything. And I think it's partly featured in Men in Black. But Central Park, I will pick over Corona Park because there's a lot of weird stuff in Central Park. I live near it. I've been able to go there a lot. A lot of musicians are there. Weird, like acrobatics happen every now and then. There's free concerts in there. There's a lot of really cool happenings, whether you know it or not. So like there's always a nice, what's really odd about Central Park is that there's always a quiet spot you can find, considering it's in the heart of the city or heart of Manhattan. It is just, it's like this weird like Zen place in the middle of madness. So Central Park.
We got to go on a vacation right before the pandemic happened in New York City. One of my favorite memories is we were walking through Central Park. There was like a booth, and you could go up to the booth and get a chess set and play chess. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Or you can like get in a boat.
Yeah.
It's like random weird, like here's the boathouse. So yeah, get in a boat. It's like, all right, need a bike? Here's a bike. It's like, all right, it's very, very, it's equipable, I guess, or it gives you equipment.
All right, JFK versus LaGuardia.
Oh, JFK, 100%. Although I've not been to the new LaGuardia, I've heard it's gotten a lot better. But LaGuardia, from when I grew up, it was a hole. It was a terrible, terrible place to be flying out of. It was just so run down and lousy. JFK is no walk in the park either because it's an international airport, so it's huge and there's so many people there, and everyone's confused. But at least it's well lit. It's laid out in a large space. LaGuardia is also really small, by the way. So you have small and crappy. It's different when you're like, because you feel like you're trapped in LaGuardia. At least that's what it used to be like. But I would pick JFK over LaGuardia any day at this point.
We've already had a street hot dogs question. I'm going to give you another challenge now. Will street hot dogs still win? We'll see. Street hot dogs versus a good bagel with lox and capers.
Well, I don't like capers, but I will go with a good bagel over a hot dog because I like bread a lot. And bagels in New York are great. Yes, I've had bagels elsewhere. No, I've not had a Montreal bagel, but I hear they're fantastic. The ones in Petaluma, surprisingly not bad if you go to the right places. Noah's Bagels in Petaluma, if you're in Petaluma, California. But yeah, bagels, I'll pick a bagel over a hot dog pretty much any day.
My thing is I need to make sure there's at least some sort of protein on it because I feel so bad eating all the carbs in a bagel. I'm like, I have to cut this with something to justify it.
No, I'm fine with it. To me, it's like it's having a dessert. You might as well say like if you want like a piece of cake or a pie or donut or a bagel. I'm like, yeah, they're all in the same category.
All right, and last but not least, I don't think this one's going to be very difficult for you. Mets versus Yankees.
That would be the New York Yankees. I am a Yankees fan since the 80s. I did this out of spite. That is completely true. My older brother's a Mets fan, and he was a big Mets fan when they won in 86 because that happened. It actually did happen. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, I don't like you, so I don't like your team. So I've followed the Yankees since then, and the Yankees were terrible at times in the 80s, and they were terrible sometimes in the 90s, but I saw them win a lot, which has been really fun. Been out to Yankees games and Mets games still. I'm not going to root against the Mets. I don't have time for that. And there's some people are like, well, if you like the Yankees, you must hate these other teams. It's like, no, I don't hate these other teams. I don't care. I don't have time for this because I'm focused on the Yankees. I'm not focused on the Mets. They're a totally different division. I mean, a different league even. Like, just leave them alone. But yeah, it's definitely the Yankees every single day of the week.
Yeah, you don't have to be anti something to be pro something else, probably.
Right.
It's a good lesson to take away.
Hometown hot takes.
You won the game, Iyaz. You won all the points. You won all the prizes, which are none.
I did it. I won nothing.
Symbolic.
Where will I put nothing? I will have to make space for nothing. I look forward to this.
You can hang it up on that big white void you have behind you. So it'll be good.
But it might clash.
All right. Well, we're gonna talk some more with Iyaz about growing up in NYC and everything. But first, we have to take a quick break from our sponsors. So hang tight, and we'll be right back. Where I'm From is brought to you by Strenn Studio. That's STREANN Studio, the web app that puts you in charge of the live show. Strenn Studio allows you to take your streaming game to the next level by allowing you to stream to multiple platforms at once. If you want to go to Twitch, if you want to go to YouTube, you can stream to all of those platforms at once, get feedback from your audience, and most importantly, it puts you in control of the show. Now, Strenn Studio has several packages that work for just about any type of broadcaster. From the free plan, where you can stream with a watermark, all the way up to the gold plan, where you can have up to 8 guests. You can stream to as many social platforms as you want. You can get a web link to share your show with external audiences, and you can even get an iframe so you can embed your live stream show directly into your website. Hey, I love Strenn Studio so much, I'm using it to produce this show. I want to thank Stream Studio for supporting Where I'm From. And you can give this fantastic software a spin and support Where I'm From at the same time. Just head over to our website at billmeeks.com/whereimfrom and click on the Stream Studio banner so they know we sent you their way.
That's a pretty neat looking service.
And we're back. We want to thank Stream Studio for sponsoring Where I'm From. Now, Iyaz, what took you out of the Big Apple? What took you out of Queens?
College. I went to school in Boston, and the thing is, I remember checking out schools, and I thought Boston was nice because it was greener. Because I grew up in Queens, and it's very, very brown and gray, and it's got a lot more concrete. And one of the things is my older siblings, they went to school closer to my folks. And as I think I might be the most rebellious of the four kids, I wanted to get away from my parents and kind of have my own thing, kind of like essentially like a television spinoff. All right, like they moved Frasier to Seattle, they moved Iyaz to Boston. Okay, that's what happens. So I went to Boston for school at Boston University, and it was nice. And there was a bit of a culture clash because there was stuff I didn't know. Like I had no idea the subway stopped. And this sounds silly, but it's true because somebody would tell me the last train is at 2:00, and I was like, "What do you mean the last train? There's no last train." They go, "I'm like, what happens?" They go, "The train service stops." I'm like, that's weird. Why would that happen? I don't understand that. And so that happened, and that school, Boston University, is pretty good. I liked it there. The thing about that town, and I called it a town, and they always hated it when I called it a town because it's not a town, but that place. It's got so many colleges. It's got so many young people there. So I remember seeing The Waterboy when it was out in theaters, and we were all like, basically, we were this demographic for the movie because everyone laughed at the exact same time, at the exact same loudness, for the exact same amount of like the duration, and then it stopped over and over and over again. So that's what got me out of New York for several years.
While you were there, did you get much of a chance to absorb the local culture in Boston? Like, what were some of your favorite Bostonian things that you got into while you were there?
The Celtics would be actually one of the things I got into there because the Celtics were terrible at the time, and the school they'd have tickets for sale for like $2. And so like $2 is nothing. So it's $2, and we'd buy a bunch of tickets and we'd go up to it wasn't TD Garden then, whatever it was called then, a Fleet Center. That's what it was called. And you were back up against the wall. You're literally all the way up and back, but it's basketball. It's a small arena, so you can see stuff great. So I got into the Celtics there. I got really into college hockey because Boston University is a hockey school, and I didn't play there. BU used to have a really small venue for their hockey games that had a really low roof, and so it would the sound would just bounce right back down, and we would just be chanting at every opponent all the time, and you could hear it. It would just be deafening. But they several years after I left, they moved into a much larger arena. It's called the Gannis Arena. They've run shows there now. Like I know AEW Wrestling is there every now and then, but that place just doesn't have the same acoustics. It was kind of a bummer because the noise that would happen with BU hockey was great. So I got into hockey that way a lot because I still enjoy watching hockey.
Yeah.
What's weird is like I started looking up some of the people I went to school with, and I think one of the heads or the president of like the Rangers, it went to BU and he was a player there. I'm like, oh, that was weird. So like I got into I'm like, what am I doing with my life? This man's already won a bunch of Stanley Cups and he's running the Rangers. And I'm like, okay, that's good for this guy.
See, this is exactly why I don't follow anyone I went to high school with on Facebook because I'm going to be constantly comparing.
I saw the name and I'm like, that can't be right. And I started the Wikipedia hunt and I'm like, wow, this is amazing. So hockey and the Celtics, because when I watched basketball in the 90s, I watched Jordan. I liked watching the Bulls because Jordan was playing. I watched him on the Wizards too. It wasn't the best thing to watch, but I watched it. But I didn't have a real local team. And like I said, my brother, he likes local teams. So he liked the Knicks. And I'm like, I didn't want to watch the Knicks because they were playing against the Bulls a lot. So I wasn't a fan of that.
Yeah.
While I was in Boston, got really into the Celtics. So it's still weird. So I'm an odd Yankees and Celtics fan, which confuses a lot of people because they're like, you're a Red Sox fan, right? I'm like, absolutely not. I am not. I'm not an anti-fan either. I don't go and like, I didn't, back in the day when I was in school, like I was really into baseball, watching baseball a lot. But like you could hear Fenway Park from one of my friend's dorms. So like we'd be hanging out and you would hear, there was a game, I think it was like 13-1. It was Pedro versus Clemens, and Clemens got rocked. and you would hear it. So the thing is, we were watching it on TV, but you would hear it first from Fenway. And then you'd see it like, oh God, it's now 12-1. Oh God, it's 13-1. At least I was that way. Yeah. For me, it was. For my friends who are all from New England, they're like, yeah, this is great. I'm like, yeah, it's not so great. But I also didn't talk smack back then because I didn't want anyone talking smack to me. And I was right, by the way, because the Yankees have that historic collapse against the Boston Red Sox, blowing a 3-0 or 3-1 lead. I can't remember, but still horrible. But yeah, so I got into, I guess, more sports there. What else is in the culture there? I mean, the thing is, since everyone in the schools from somewhere else, and there's so many different universities there was a lot of just international flavors. So like, you would just try out anything. Like, I remember having a chicken foot. It was cooked and everything. It wasn't like I just, grabbed the chicken. We tried a lot more experimental foods there. So I'm like, what is the Boston culture exactly?
That's a good place to go to college, though, because that's kind of what college is for, right? Is sort of like, experimenting with who you want to be as an adult.
Oh yeah, a lot of experiments there, and since there's a lot of kids, there's a lot of stupid ideas that get carried through.
Well, one more Boston question, just because I don't know if you know this about me. Most people who know me pretty well know this about me. My favorite band in the whole wide world is Bare Naked Ladies, who have a very special connection to Boston. So I was wondering if you ever had any sort of run-ins with BNL or Bare Naked Ladies, especially like that month 1 week came out. I remember there being footage of like tens of thousands of people like attending a concert downtown in Boston.
No, I wasn't into that then, because I remember in college I got really into the Beatles and more into metal, and Bare Naked Ladies didn't fit that aesthetic. So I didn't really pay attention to that stuff. But I do remember now you bring us certain things back. I'm like, that's right. I used to go to a lot of music clubs, because there'd be always these like up and coming bands and they'd be cheap. So I went to these things a lot. So I tried to get into that a bit, but I couldn't really find a lot of friends to go with me on these. So I'm like, I don't want to keep going alone because I look like a weirdo. There was that, and file sharing. I got way more into technology in college. I forgot about that because we had Ethernet everywhere, and the amount of file sharing in a giant dorm that has like thousands of people in it. Oh, there was so much music I got to obtain. Let's go with that.
Yeah, I can remember like the first couple of years Napster was out, because our college didn't have Ethernet in the dorm rooms, but a college right down the hill from us did. And I remember going there and being like, man, you can download an entire album in like a minute. That's it. Like I had to set that up and let it run all night on my AOL account or whatever to get it to go through.
And it was a dedicated line, and it wasn't phone. And I was like, what is this connector? Like it's an RJ45. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm learning. All right. What is this? All right. I need to make sure I have a NIC. A network interface card. Okay, got it. Like I had to learn. Everyone has to learn this stuff. I remember being so excited because also at the new business school that just opened when I got there, they had Ethernet everywhere. Like if you were like by the potted plants in the hallway, like there's like the pot itself actually had like an Ethernet jack, and you're like, all right, that works. But it was really weird because that was like it was the beginning of like the internet. I mean, like being used by everybody. So it was an interesting time.
Growing up on dial-up, I was so jealous of people in college who had like a full like dedicated line and everything and could download stuff really all their JPEGs in minutes,
Download it. You could just look at a web page and you don't bother to save it. You didn't have to worry about seeing it again. You're like, oh yeah, I can call it back up. I bookmarked it.
Something I wanted to ask you about, after Boston, you went to Vermont to study lawyering. We've already touched on this a little bit. After, going through the whole program and everything, why did you not pursue that? And why did you circle back around to tech?
Okay. So this story, I went to Vermont Law School, for reasons I can explain a different time, but I went to Vermont Law School, and it's an environmental school of all things. And so I finished that off. And when I was there though, I got really into tax law, because I just found it interesting. If you're ever looking for the most creative law on the planet, tax law is some of the most creative law in the world, because when people have money involved, they will come up with the craziest arguments to keep it. So I really enjoyed that stuff. So I actually ended up going from Vermont Law School to New York University School of Law to get my master's in tax law, which is nuts. But the thing is, when I got out of school, it was 2008. And 2008 was this massive recession where every every like new lawyer was competing with lots of other like top tier lawyers who were taking a lot less money.
Yeah.
So the market was completely crap. And at the time, I'd already been writing tech blogs. I was ready to write on the Apple blog. I like just writing about tech. I just do that for fun.
Mm-hmm.
For the bar exam, I was going nuts. I had to study for like 12 hours a day or so. And I mean that literally. The only thing I would do in the course of a day was like I had my papers with me. So if I was at the supermarket, one, I would be outside. It was amazing. It was actually outside my home. But I had these papers on the shopping cart, studying. And I was going mad. Like, I mean, like I felt like I was going crazy. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, well, you know what I'm going to do while I'm studying for the bar? I'm going to start a podcast. That's what I'm going to do. It's 2006. I'm going to start a podcast. I'm like, how hard could it be? And it's funny because I'm friends with some of the people that I was like, I'm watching your show. I think I could do that. So I talked to them. I'm like, let's try it. So I started doing I was like, what's in the market? So all these tech podcasts. So I did like an entertainment podcast at the same time. I'm like, that was different than now. Obviously, can you imagine movie reviews online? What
was the first podcast you ever listened to out of curiosity?
First podcast I listened to was, I think it was just called Revenge of the Screensavers. It was like the original, like before it was called Twit. It was like, that was the original ones. I started listening to that because I used to watch Tech TV. When I was in Boston, I'd come back home, I'd watch Pardon the Interruption on ESPN, and then I would switch it to Tech TV to watch the Screensavers. And I would just watch that. And so when I heard this guy had a podcast, I'm like, I'll try it out. So I started listening to that. But then I remember Leo saying like, you know, if there are a lot of people out there like, they can't stand that we keep talking so long, blah, blah, blah. He goes, if you really want to listen to a good podcast out there, try out Buzz Out Loud on CNET. There's Tom Merritt, there's Molly Wood, there's Veronica Belmont. They do a tight show every day. And if you want to you just listen to them, you can listen to them and us. You can do whatever you want. And that's how I started getting into CNET, which is really weird. So like that was like the first podcast, and Buzz Out Loud was like the big second one. And that Hack 5 was in there. I used to watch them a lot. And I'm friends with these people, so it's weird. So yeah.
That was something that I, especially in the early days, I think Leo Laporte from Twit was very keen on was cooperation, I think he called it. Like where, you know, this podcasting space is new. We're not in competition. We're in cooperation. Obviously, it's a much different landscape now, but I always like that idea of no one who is even in your same niche or whatever is your competitor. They're your friend. And that's something I kind of took in because I did fan casting for several years. Like I would constantly have, like we did a show on Gotham and Once Upon a Time on ABC. So I'd have all the other Gotham podcasters or Once Upon a Time podcasters come on my show because we're not really competing with each other because we're different flavors of the same thing. So if someone likes one thing, if someone likes, I don't know, Code Red Mountain Dew, they're probably going to like Tangerine Splash Mountain Dew too. You know, it's just different flavors for different folks.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like there's I wouldn't say infinite time, but people have time to choose what kind of thing they want to listen to today. Like there are days I'm listening to Simpsons podcasts these days, or I'm listening to wrestling podcasts. Or whatever day I'm feeling like, or I'll just go completely different with like a fitness podcast. Like you don't have to like, this is my one thing. It's like, well, there's lots of time and lots of space to listen to things if you want.
That being said, we were always felt very complimented when our listeners would write in and tell us we were way better than all the others. But I, you know, I'm still friends with all those folks. Okay, Iyaz, it's time for another game. This game I really love. It's called Wheel of Anecdotes. So I'm going to give you a suggestion, and your challenge is to respond with a short anecdote from your hometown. The shorter the better. Make sense?
Okay, I will try.
Okay, Spider-Man.
He went to school in Forest Hills, where I went to school.
Was I mean, I know there were some decades between his time in Forest Hills and yours, but was it a pretty accurate portrayal, you think, in the comics, or?
In the comics, yes. I want to say the Raimi Spider-Man, yes. And in the new trilogy, yeah, it's a different part of Queens, but yeah.
Okay, the subway.
I'm terribly paranoid on the subway. I literally keep my back against a pole because there have been a lot of people who've been pushed into the tracks lately. That's literally true.
Oh, wow, really? Have you been more cautious going on it since, you know, the pandemic and everything? I'm assuming so.
Oh, yeah. But the other thing is I was always a germaphobe, or a light germaphobe anyway. I was always a guy with sanitizer on me. So things didn't really change too much with me other than I wore a mask.
Okay, scary.
When I was 8 years old, I got to watch A Nightmare on Elm Street because my aunt was babysitting us. I couldn't sleep for 2 weeks.
And that's way too young to be watching a Freddy Krueger movie, probably.
I mean, it turned out, we actually watched it with my son now. He's 12. We saw it in the theater, and it was so much less scary than I remember. But I was 8 and I was freaking out. But like now you can here's an interview with Robert Englund, so it's so less scary.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I remember that, and like it definitely colored my view of A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, and you were also kind of growing up in an environment where there wasn't as much, media knowledge either, so you didn't know what to expect from a Freddy Krueger movie necessarily,
My aunt, she was just like, hey, I got this movie, I rented it, and I know it's kind of scary. You sure you guys gonna watch this? And I'm like, I don't know. Sure. And yeah, I just, what a dummy I was. But yeah, you couldn't look it up. It's like, all right, whatever, let's try it.
Okay, snow.
My gosh, the amount, my freaking school never freaking closed. You'd hear the thing, we had to put the radio on and listen and listen. You know how annoying it is to listen for something that never comes? It's just going like, PS 100, this school, that school, and we're done. Because you're waiting for that part and you're like, my school's not on that list. My school's never closed.
Yeah, well, I guess, NYC, it's very much a pedestrian run town kind of, so schools probably don't close nearly as much as they do other places for that sort of thing.
Oh, no, they changed it. It seemed like the second I graduated from high school, they're like, oh yes, the children need to be saved. Let's close because my younger brother was still going to that school. They would close like every year. I'm like, what? What are you doing? Like, how did this change? But also I don't feel that much ill will. It's like, yeah, he got the day off, snow day, good for him.
Do you feel specifically targeted that you didn't get as many snow days? Like they waited until after you left?
I think a little part of me believes that. A tiny bit.
Okay, Times Square.
I got recognized at Times Square once, which was very strange.
From the podcasting stuff, I'm guessing?
Yeah. Some show I did, and someone was like, oh, you're from, like, first when they point at you, you're like, okay, what do you want? They're like, you're Iyaz. And I'm like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And they're like, oh yeah, watch your thing. So that's Times Square.
Yeah, was it one of those things where they come up, they identify that they know you, they say they like the thing, and then it's really awkward because you don't have anything left to talk about?
Well, I for some reason, I naturally just said, after they pointed at me and then came up to me and then said, whatever, I just said, I'm Iyaz. And they shook their hand. They're like, well, I know. I'm like, what is your name? And they said their name. And I'm like, yeah. And then we started just chatting a little bit. But that's like my go-to at this point. So if somebody recognizes me or something, I do introduce myself because they often forget to. So I'm like, well, that seems to work. So I like that.
Okay, last but not least, bodega.
So I got some stories. I'm not proud of some of the stories. So I'm not saying those. I'll just stop at the local one that's near me. To this point, the sandwich guy at the bodega that's always open, this place is 24 hours, he knows me at this point because I come stumbling in around 2 o'clock in the morning and he makes me a chicken Caesar wrap almost automatically, which is nice, but also kind of scary that he knows exactly what I want to eat at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, you can't get away with anything there. You're a known quantity.
Yep. It's weird.
Nice. Well, that does it for Wheel of Anecdotes. And I'd like to say, Iyaz, you've won again. I will send you another nothing to put on your wall next to the other nothing.
I will place it very well next to it. I'll make sure I get some wall anchors for the nothing.
So you're back in the NYC area now. So have you been back to the old neighborhood? What's changed since you left?
No, there's a giant casino there now. The racetrack, Aqueduct racetrack next to it now there's this big casino, Resort World, I want to say. And that is weird because my mom likes to go to Atlantic City and stuff. But we went to this place once, Resort World, and it's so strange to see this massive enclosed box in Queens, because like usually you think of Queens like the suburbs, you walk around or you get in a car or whatever. Yeah. But to get into this enclosure, essentially this massive enclosure in Queens, especially that part of Queens, is really weird. So there's that. There was where I went to high school, they've finished the air train, which is this monorail thing that attaches one airport to another thing. I don't know what it actually attaches to. I've never used it, but that was in planning when I was in school, and there was protests against it. And they did, one of those NIMBY things, not in my backyard things. So that's changed. The Van Wyck, that hasn't changed. That sucks. I think it's wider now, but the Van Wyck Expressway is is oh my God, it's one of the slowest, worst freaking expressways I've ever been on. It still sucks. So
I think I've only been in it in an Uber, and yeah, it was not a fun Uber ride for sure.
They changed the exit. My mom's exit was like 1B, and then now they made it 1W. And I'm like trying to explain to the driver this 1B, and it's like, there's no 1B. I'm like, what do you mean there's no 1B? He's like, there's no 1B. I'm like, okay, well, when we go close to it, I'll tell you where we're going. They made it the A and the B and the E and the W, I think. And it's like, I get it, I understand that, but I assumed it had been that way. The A and the B had been that way for at least 10 years of my actual memory. So like, why change it? I don't know, but they did. That's probably really rough moving back to an area after being away for so long, and just like all the little things that have changed. You're like, oh, I can take a shortcut here, and then that shortcut's not there anymore. It's a convenient food mart or something. Yeah, that reminds me. The Pinocchio's Deli is gone. I used to like that place. I used to get sandwiches there. That I think is just a different deli. The Flash Q, which was a pool hall that I wasn't supposed to go to, that is also no longer there. But they had Street Fighter 2, and that's why I went there. But yeah, a lot of places are gone.
Considering there are so many places that are gone and you're back now, what are some places that you're liking right now that you might recommend for people to check out?
So if you're going to go to Queens and you're going to go to my part of Queens, go to Pizza Port. That is, I think, near Lefferts. It's a really good pizza joint in my memory. So I don't know if it's still good. Just sorry about that. Where else could you go? There's a place called Trackside. I lovingly say this. It's like a dive bar. It's near the Home Depot. It's by the racetrack as well. It's called Trackside. Go figure. My wife and I, we went there recently, and this is the pre-pandemic. We went there and we ordered 2 beers, and the lady said 2. We said 2 what? She says $2. And we've been in Manhattan so long, we're like, what? Like these? So these are like Bud Lights, but they're $1 a piece. So if you like some cheap beer, good atmosphere, good people, go to Trackside.
That's like almost less than you would pay if you just picked up like a 6-pack.
Yeah, I mean the glasses were small, so you're probably getting like 3/4 of a can. But you can't really complain there,
especially after 3 of them.
The last place I'd suggest in Queens, go to Austin Street in Forest Hills, because there you'll find like a really cool bunch of shops there. There's Pearl, that's an art store. So if you like to draw, it's fantastic. There used to be comic book shops everywhere around there. I don't know if they all exist anymore, but I went back to Austin Street in the last like 5 years. It's still really fun. So if you like walking around, it's not a mall, it's an actual street, and like there's like lots of little stores. So, like a lot of cool stuff you can find there and good places to eat.
Iyaz, it has been fantastic getting to talk to you really for the first time. I think we got along really well. I've been worried about you being an asshole for so long, and you weren't. So that's perfect.
That's usually what I hear. I hear that I'm expecting you to act this way, and most times they say it's 50-50 on how it turns out.
We tend to troll each other online. It's okay, but I'm glad we were super friendly in person. If people want to check out what you're doing, where can they go?
Well, you can go to the dumpster fire, twitter.com/Iyaz, IYAZ. I'm there, and I'll promote my own stuff there. And like on the bottom, you'll see thisoldnerd.finite comedy. I really should have set this up better. But if you go to thisoldnerd.com, that's the site where I have my show that I'm doing these days. That show is it's a do-it-yourself kind of tech show. So you want to have the most tech-forward home and life as possible. That's the show I do. I fail a lot, so you don't have to. The projects are meant to be short, because the idea behind it is you don't have a lot of time, because you got like kids and you have like podcasts to listen to, or like things to watch, or like, responsibilities like, mowing lawns or whatever else you want to do. The tech projects we put together on the show are usually fun improvements. We always make sure that we check if everybody in the house is happy with it, because if you're adding technology in your home, you better make sure everyone in the house is happy with it. Otherwise, it ain't worth doing.
Yeah, I really enjoy it too, because the content feels very organic. It's like you start one project and you run into a little corner of an issue, and then the next video is all about that issue, or like refining that issue. So it kind of feels like it builds off each other, like a nice improv scene or something.
It does seem to happen that way, because you're trying to fix one thing and then you're fixing another 15 just to make one thing work, and you're like, was it worth it? And you're like, yes, it was. You have to convince yourself it was worth it.
Nice. Okay. Well, I want to thank you again for joining the show today.
Thanks for having me.
People, thank you. If you're out there watching the show, I do suggest going over to Apple Podcast and leaving us an honest review because it really helps get the word out about the show. If you want to check us out live, we stream live over on my personal YouTube channel at Bill Meeks LA. And then we post a edited, more fluffy version of the podcast over on the at Where I'm From podcast YouTube channel a few weeks later. If you want to tell us about where you're from, or if you want to respond to anything Iyaz said today, shoot me an email, bill@billmeeks.com. And as always, you can check out all these links and more, all the episodes, everything at billmeeks.com/where I'm from. Well, that does it for this week. Join us next time.